everyone. I am Alexandra Proca. I am the host of the Be Inspired video series organized by Women in Localization. And today I'm talking with Lori Harmon, currently Vice President of Global Business Development at Cloudflare. Lori has a 20-plus year career in sales and support of the global customer. And she started as an engineer and then moved into sales, where she developed a stellar career, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. As a leader, she employs both strategy and collaboration to build effective teams and inspire the team members. Welcome, Lori.
Thanks, Alexandra. I'm so glad we got introduced and I have this opportunity to join you today. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited. And that's why we wanted to feature you for the Be Inspired. I think you have a lot of inspiration to share for Women in Localization members. So I was thinking, what do we start with? Because you have so much experience. And I want to just start with like a basic definition of success for you. So how do you personally define success?
Well, thank you for asking that. And, obviously defining success is up to the individual. So maybe my definition could be different than yours or anybody else listening to this podcast. But for me, my initial definition, right, because, being like younger, I probably didn't think quite as broadly back then, but my initial definition of success was I wanted to, once I discovered computers, so we'll say that was more than 20 years ago, I said, oh, well, this is going to be a great industry. I want to get into it. And I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. So the IBM was really big in Charlotte at the time. I'm like, I want to go to school, major in something related to computers, and get a job at IBM. And then I was going to spend the rest of my career at IBM. The good news is I did those two things and I went to IBM, as you mentioned. I started as a systems engineer. And then, but I came to California. And I saw Silicon Valley. I'm like, ooh, maybe I won't stay here because Silicon Valley looks really fast paced and interesting and things like that. So although I got a fabulous amount of training at IBM, I did decide to make a change and then moved on. And as I did that, I started to revise, how I define success, like moving up in an organization. Personally, I always wanted to be a leader. I kind of didn't want to be an individual contributor, even though, yes, you have to do that. And since I came from a background which was, well, we weren't homeless, but we were not really wealthy, I always was just very, very driven to be better off than how I grew up. So I think that ultimately is the core of my success, is just the drive that I have to always improve, basically seek out and always learn and improve and be curious and just try to advance what I'm doing over time. And then even a few years later, as I got farther into my career, once I found inside sales, I really developed a passion for that particular group. And since then, I've wanted to stay and just continue to refine my craft and take on larger and larger roles just in that particular area. Now, people may not want to stop somewhere. They may want to keep going, to the very top. But that's why everybody has an individual definition of that.
What would you advise young people, young women who start now? What's that element that can drive one person, especially one young person, up?
Well, I think part of it is, you don't have to figure out what you want to do forever at the beginning, right? But just kind of like declare something, put together a mission. Like, I want to get a job doing X, whether it's sales, marketing. You might be in, criminal justice. You could be a pastry arts major. Like, you could do anything, but just figure out what you love to do, to start there. And, I'm a great example of what I majored in college is not really where I ended up. I was going to be a programmer and then I went into sales. So you don't always have to stick with that either, but just find something you love and try it. And later on, you might go, I don't love it as much, or I found this other thing that I got exposed to while I was trying the first thing. And now I want to make either a horizontal move or a complete pivot to something different, or maybe there's, you just want to keep going up. So finding your passion, I think, is one of the most important things in life, because you're going to spend 80-90% of your time at work. You want to make sure you're doing something fun that you really love. And I think passion can really carry people a long way in their careers. It's a sort of a form of drive, but maybe not fully driven, but you've got to love what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And here at Women in Localization, localization is an industry where people are very driven, very, very driven. It's interesting. So we're all driven by passion, but we all also come from different environments. Might have end up here by accident. We have different backgrounds, but we all love what we're doing. So that's a great start. So our young members who just started have that. However, they might encounter setbacks. They might encounter challenges. And how was it for you? How did you deal with setbacks in your career?
Everybody has setbacks and everybody makes mistakes. So one of the things, one of my children was asking about this, is like, oh, yeah, I regret some mistake. And I said, look, since everybody makes mistakes, you could spend time regretting it, or you can just analyze what I learned so you don't make the same mistake again. Because you're going to make one mistake and then something else is going to happen. You're going to make a second and a third and a fourth and on and on. So I think the main thing about how to stay motivated and not just kind of spiral down on a mistake that you've made or failure that you've had is figure out what you've learned and just make the commitment to yourself that I'm not going to make the same mistake again. I might make something else because I've learned more and I've expanded myself. I pushed myself to try something new. That's all great, but you learn from your failures. And if you don't have any, personally, I think life would be really boring, because if you're always successful and then somehow maybe a really late failure happens, you may not know how to deal with that. So just go with the flow, think about how to recover, and learn your lessons and move forward.
So in your case, what kept you going? What kept you wake up in the morning and going? What motivated you?
All right. Well, one thing that to me personally, what gets me to get up in the morning is I love to exercise. And I think, it's part of my drive. It's just my commitment to myself. So I get up at 4:30 in the morning still today, and I want to work out before I start work, because I know that if I don't, it's likely not to happen in the afternoon. And because I found my passion, and I've really liked all the jobs I've had. Like, I like getting up and going to work. Maybe there's a time when you go, oh, I don't really want to go this day or this week, but overall, I've been very fortunate. And so knowing that I have this great opportunity to contribute to a company, that gets me up. But since I know personally I want to work out first, that's kind of the first thing. Then I work out, then I'm all energized. Then I love going to work. So that is part of what has motivated me. Again, as I moved forward in life, there were situational things. So for example, at a certain point in time, I became a single mom. One of my children had some medical issues, and I was it. Like, if it wasn't for me, then we wouldn't be able to live. And so therefore I was motivated because there was nobody else to depend on. I had to do it, or nobody was going to do it. And that turns out to be a big motivator.
Earlier in life, did you have in your career in life, did you have a different vision on this work-life balance that has changed with the times? Or has it always been kind of the same?
I would say when I first started, I probably didn't have any vision of balance, or that you needed to have balance, because initially I was just very oriented towards work. I was driven to wanted to get out of Charlotte, wanted to move up. So I was very driven, and I would just work whatever I needed to do. I was working. But then, of course, got married, had children, had to reassess my priorities, because that would not have been a good model for that. And so I had to shift my priorities and how to make sure I had a work-life balance, right? Because you could still keep doing that I want to work all the time path, and then your husband's not going to be happy, or your spouse, your partner, whatever your arrangement you have, your children aren't going to be happy. And so you have to make those adjustments, or, maybe you shouldn't go down that path. If you really just want to work all the time, you may not want to take on those new things. So I did have to make adjustments and try to figure out how I could be uber organized, even more so at work, so I could get everything done and still, ideally make an impact and achieve my objectives, but also get home, take care of whatever you need to take care at home, get the kids picked up, maybe taken to activities, cook, not cook, grocery shop, whatever needed to happen. It just had to get done.
Did you ever have help?
Well, I mean, initially when I was married, obviously, my
paid
husband
help
was helpful.
Yeah.
And we did have a nanny, well, when my second child was born. And I will say, my mother-in-law was amazing. When she was younger and healthier, she's since passed away. She was a great help to us. So we did have help. And I think that's an important thing to learn, is, other than like initially my mother-in-law, I didn't really ask for help. And it took me a while to just say, oh, I need to ask somebody at the school. Maybe they can drop my kids off, or they can take them to a dance class or something like that. I think it took me a while to say, okay, I need to admit I need help. So I've definitely asked for help, especially if you have a family. You really should ask for help, because it's a village, right? And they'll ask you for help. So there'll be a way to pay them back.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying that, because as women, as you know, we put ourselves in a certain place that we can do them all. We can be the mother, the leader, the career person, all that. And the reality is we cannot, and we live in times where we can admit that. So I'm happy that you're highlighting that. So what is one women's cause, because this is a women's organization, that you feel close to and advocate for?
Well, I would say and if people look at my LinkedIn post, but overall, I advocate for, well, diversity, but equality, right? I don't want to say, hey, you need to hire more women just because they're women. That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating for, make sure you have a slate of candidates that has diversity of all kinds, whether it's gender or race or anything else. Have diversity on your hiring panels when you're interviewing, and also the candidates that you bring in. Make sure pay is equal. If you're going to do something at your company and you're going to say, okay, X people qualify for something, you have to have published qualification criteria so everybody knows that it was based on these fact-based things, and you're not just playing favorites to kind of get somebody to attend something or reward somebody. That's not fair. It has to be equal. So I really focus on equality.
And I know you are pretty passionate about boards, encouraging women to join boards, and you are on a lot of boards. Tell me more about that, and why is it important for us to be there?
Well, I think, one, it goes back to just diversity in general, right? If companies or boards are more diverse, there's lots of metrics that talk about they have more revenue, they're more profitable, they're more innovative. So it is good for the business. So number one thing, it's good for the business, and there's proven statistics around that. And I think, but for a woman, you have to want to be on the board, right? So you have to decide that you want to do that. Not everybody wants to do it. It takes more time, right? You're doing it in addition to your job. There's, depending on the board, compensation varies. I think in a lot of cases, it's really about passion. For example, I'm currently on a board that supports an LGBTQ recruitment platform because, again, I'm passionate about equality. So that fits into what I'm passionate about. But yeah, it takes additional time that I have to spend, reviewing board packets, meeting with the other executives, the other board meetings, maybe people from the company. So it is a commitment, and you have to want to do it. I think a lot of people, men and women, look at it as something to do in retirement, which is great if you could do a few boards, but you should get on them before you retire so you get your experience while you're still an operator, and then you can proceed from there. And there's also what kind of board. Do you want a public company board, a private company board? So there are organizations that women especially can join to learn more about being on a board, kind of get some teachings about, okay, what do I do once I'm on a board? How do I get on the board? Developing your CV and your cover letter, because it's not like finding a job kind of CV. It's very different. So it's a different process. So it's really good to get yourself educated if you somehow don't have that experience, and how would you have it if you haven't done it? So it's good to participate in those organizations, maybe join them and get some help and some coaching.
So, of course, for different people at different career levels, there's different levels of boards, right? There's boards that are of a lot of positions that are unpaid in our local community, and then the higher up you go, the better positions. That way, some of them might be paid, right?
Exactly.
If you bring a lot of experience and function. But what would you advise for someone who's just starting to think about it? They're middle management, and they're started to think about joining a board, because I think that's the best place. Like you're in middle management and want to enhance your career, support your career, and this is one of the avenues.
Well, my advice for somebody who's a middle manager who thinks they might want to be on a board is, maybe even try like an advisory board or nonprofit board so you can get some experience. And the other thing is then join one of these organizations, because getting on a board typically I mean, it can take years. It may not just be like, oh, I want to change jobs and it takes, I don't know, 3, 6, 9 months. It could take years to get on a board. So the sooner you start preparing and understand the skills you need, you can start developing those skills if you don't have them. You can start networking, because it's a lot about networking to get on a board. And you can start doing that in advance, because it will take you a long time. So you want to lay that foundation as early as possible. I think if it's something you're passionate about, you should try to get on a nonprofit or advisory board. Typically, those are, I mean, typically you don't get paid for being on a nonprofit board, and they may even want you to fundraise or donate money. And then advisory boards, you may or may not be allocated some stock, but it's not typically a paid role. And it can't be too close to what you do, right? It can't be in conflict with whatever company you're working at. So it just needs to be related, as in you have a passion. Or for me, because I'm a sales expert, typically people want me on their boards when they need go-to-market advice. Whereas if they needed legal advice or financial advice, then I wouldn't be the person. So it also needs to be in your wheelhouse of expertise. I think that's important, because the matching of what people want on a board is very specific for what they need at the time they need it. And they may evolve as a company, and then, I don't know, 2 or 3 years later, they may have a different need. So it does change. It's not, again, quite as the same as looking for a job that says, okay, this title, these are the skill sets. It's a little bit different, but starting early and maybe trying to get some experience on advisory boards or nonprofits, I still think it's a good idea, because you still have experience and there's still governance on a nonprofit board, and you're going to have governance in a private or public company board.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also build that self-confidence that you then carry on for the next board adventure.
And you make connections that might be on public or private company boards that might refer you to one of those boards.
Exactly. I want to tackle a little your role as a team lead, because that's something that's is also very dear to your heart and crucial to your career. And I was saying earlier in the introduction that you are leading. You employ both strategy and collaboration to build a team and create effective teams. Tell me more about that fine line and how you've been walking it.
Okay, well, thank you. I think especially when you're building a team, well, you need a strategy, right? Like, what are you building? Like, what's the strategy? What's the cost? What's the business outcome? Because very few people are going to fund potentially building a new team if you don't have all of those metrics outlined. And then you need to figure out, okay, if I'm going to go here, say, I don't know, 12 months, how do I back into with the execution plan? So what are you going to build? What are they going to produce? What's the profile of the employees that you need to hire to actually go do this proposal that you have? And so you have to build, start building your team. I think it's really important, whether it's built or, it's already built and you inherit it, or you're building yourself, to always be open, because you're going to have to understand. So for example, processes, tools, the things that are going to be in place, the infrastructure that you need to run a team, but you need to be open to feedback, especially when it's new, because you're creating something that wasn't there before potentially. And it's different at every company. Is it just because I run business development at company A or inside sales at company A doesn't mean it can be done exactly the same at company B, because they have differences, nuances. So, but you have to start with a baseline. You have to start with industry standard metrics, and then you see if, hey, are we going to achieve those? How can we get to those? So be a good listener for feedback, because you may need to make an adjustment. And of course, put in incentives in place that will get people excited about the role. And I try to make sure I do a listening tour of the team every year, depending on the size, like skip level manager interviews. So you kind of know what's happening. So you're not like up in your tower, and you're not in touch with what's happening on the ground, because you may not make the right decisions if you're not in touch with kind of what's happening in general.
I see. So in your position, when you take on a team that's already built, so I'm not talking about new teams, already built, a very different position and more subtle. In your role as a vice president, who's your best friend in the team?
Oh, well, I think probably operations was the best group as a friend, because they're the ones who are going to tell you the metrics of, what's really happening under the covers. If you have them or they have them, they can compare the metrics to industry best practices. You can see, being in a sales role, you can see performance by person, but what are the leading indicators that will lead you to believe they can perform? And then the lagging indicators to say they did perform, or leading indicators to say, oh, they're not on track. What do we need to adjust to help them get on track? Is it coaching? Is it the platform? Is it content? I mean, there's so many questions you can ask. But I think the key thing is leveraging operations and being able to do like a SWOT analysis to understand what's working, what's not, opportunities, threats, all those things. That's a really key thing to do when you first start.
Great feedback to hear. Thank you. I want to go a little bit into what the sales aspect, and I know sales has been traditionally associated with certain personality features that were predominantly male, and sales has been predominantly a male-dominated industry. No, I think numbers have changed lately, and I would like to ask you if how you've seen things shifting, and if those requirements for a successful salesperson have changed over time, and in what way?
Well, I mean, I have seen a shift. I don't have the exact numbers, but I definitely see more women, maybe more women leaders, not a ton, but I do see more women in sales. And I think, from the requirements perspective, again, it depends on every company. Like I've noticed here at Cloudflare where I work now, like we obviously had a certain profile that we hired when we started the company. It was small, scrappy startup, but now we're $1 billion company. So the profile, the person you would hire to just integrate with our culture and to be able to take us to the next level, we've changed our profile because that's just what companies do. Like you need to change over time because you develop as a company. So I do think the requirements change. I think from a core, core aspect, core characteristics, I think one of the questions we talked about was, what is it about women you might want to hire in sales that makes them especially suited for the role? I think some of those things we're typically good listeners. A lot of people come to us for therapy, daily therapy, weekly therapy. We're often very detail oriented, and we might be more empathetic than some other people are in terms of the situation. So building those relationships is really, really key in a sales organization to work with your customers to get them over the first purchase, but also if you continue to own that customer to get them to expand over time. So I think those things are really key. And let's not ignore the fact that because we often have more responsibilities outside of work, we are really, really, really organized. So we get it done.
I have a few rapid fire questions.
Okie doke.
So the first rapid fire question is, tell us a quote that resonates with you and why.
My quote is, spring always follows winter. Okay, so you might be having a bad time, you might have had a failure, something might be going haywire in your life. That's winter, right? You're having a hard time. But there's always going to be a spring after that. Always. So just stay positive. You're going to recover. It's going to be okay. And I actually got that. And I think the person who said it, his name was Hal Borland, who I don't know who that is, but I first read it. I happen to practice Buddhism. So it was a quote I read in some of my Buddhist readings. So I just thought that was really meaningful because it says that no matter how bad things are, there's always an upside downstream.
Absolutely. The sun is out there today, although in the morning it was not. So
exactly. California is very good for that.
What book is on your nightstand now?
Well, I mean, I think one I keep though on my nightstand is like The Alchemist, just because I've read it and I've tagged it and I've highlighted it, and I don't go back to it every day, but sometimes if I need like a little cool quote or something inspirational, I'll just open The Alchemist. I think it's such a great book. I think everybody should at least read it once.
Why are you so taken by it? What exactly hit it for you?
Well, I think it did talk about positivity and overall, really, ultimately, I think how people can manifest through the universe, like whatever they want. Like you can decide I want X, and obviously you have to do work. It just doesn't happen it's not a miracle, but you put it out to the universe and the universe will help you make that become a reality. So to me, that's what I got out of The Alchemist.
Great. The classic question, and please don't answer Paulo Coelho. Paulo Coelho. Who would you like to have dinner with and why?
Well, I had to think about this one. I think it'd be Michelle Obama. I've seen her speak a couple times, and she just seems so intelligent and well-rounded and unbiased. I would just love to, and I've read her book, Becoming. I would love to have her for dinner.
And what would you ask her?
Oh my gosh, what would I ask her? I'd probably ask her some of the same questions you asked me today, like how did you overcome X, Y, and Z in your life? Some of that's in her book, but I'm sure she has other good stories that she could tell that, you can't say everything in a book. So there's probably some other good stories under there that I would hear.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Laura. It's been a pleasure. I learned a lot, and so will our audience, and so inspirational. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, Alexandra. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed our conversation and look forward to future conversation.